Hello and welcome to this Pro Tools Studio webinar. My name is Dave Tyler. I'm very pleased to be presenting this. We have some amazing guests coming on this, as you've seen. I'm sure the people have everyone signed up to hear what DJ Swivel and Damien Lewis have got to say, but also to learn about the new Pro Tools Studio. So welcome to everyone on Zoom and also on social media platforms. So we're streaming this live. We have a bunch of people from the Avid team who are going to be there to answer questions. So if you're on Zoom, then you can use the Q&A function, which will then ask the question. As I say, we've got teams of people who are there to answer you directly. Or what I'd really encourage everyone to do is to ask questions of Jordan and Damien as we go along. It'd be great to get some sort of specific questions for them about their workflow, about anything they talk about, so that towards the end, I can sort of weave some of those into our discussion. So as I say, we're going to be talking about Pro Tools Studio, but before we do that, I wanted to introduce our guests and get them to say hi and maybe say a couple of things about themselves. So Damien and Jordan, if you're there, if you turn your cameras on and get your mics on. Hey, how you doing? So hey, so
What's up, guys?
hey, so Jordan, DJ Swivel, do you
How
want
are
to
you?
just give us a minute, quick overview of you, what you do, and tell us a bit about yourself.
What do I do? Well, feels like a bit of everything. I've been a, engineer, mixer, producer for, professionally for 17 years and personally longer than that. Um, I've sort of touched a bit on everything in the business. I started as obviously an intern and then a recording engineer working with Fabulous and ultimately Beyonce. Um, and then I sort of focused on mixing and linked up with the Chainsmokers and mixed, vocal produced, and even co-produced a lot of their records like Closer and Don't Let Me Down. And now more recently I've been doing a lot more songwriting and written like 8 or 9 songs for BTS and been sort of focused on that, and I kind of like juggle all of it. Now I also make plugins too, so I don't know, it's a
Nice.
loaded question for me, but
That's
yeah,
great. Thank you.
yeah.
How about you, Damien?
Uh,
I have a kind of similar story. I started out as a professional drummer, actually, probably around 15 or 16 years old in Detroit, and played in a bunch of bands and just kind of naturally progressed into the recording studio. And that was in Atlanta. And just started working as an engineer and producer and mixer and drummer. And I live in Los Angeles now and work on a lot of pop and R&B and hip hop here in LA. And same as Jordan, I think I've probably been using Pro Tools since like version 7, I believe it was. So yeah, it's been a minute now.
Nice. So what we're going to do is, as I said, we're here to talk about Pro Tools Studio and also for you to talk about the way that you use Pro Tools and so on. But so I wanted to do is just spend a minute just introducing Pro Tools Studio and kind of and where it fits into to the Pro Tools lineup, because we've introduced a new version of Pro Tools in April. That actually changed the lineup. So for the first time, we've got this new entry-level tier called Pro Tools Artist, which is really aimed at people who are getting into music creation and production. And it's just under $10 a month, but it's incredibly capable DAW, pretty much everything you need to get going with your creating and your songwriting and so on. And then what we've done is we've taken what was Pro Tools software and renamed it to Pro Tools Studio, given it a bunch of new features, kept it at the same price of $299 a year. And that's really aimed more at kind of serious music producers and engineers. And of course, above that, we've got Pro Tools Ultimate. So renaming Pro Tools Studio means that Pro Tools software has finally got a proper name. So people kind of, to differentiate it from Ultimate, people would say Pro Tools Vanilla, Pro Tools Regular, all these kind of things. So now we can get rid of all of that and we could just call it Pro Tools Studio. And as I say, it's got a bunch of new features. Obviously all the great stuff that you have in Pro Tools software already. but you've got double the number of audio tracks now. So doubled it from 256 to 512 audio tracks, which is pretty massive. We've added clip effects, and we're going to talk a bit about this in a bit more detail and hear from Jordan and Damien as to how they actually use it. We've included advanced automation. Now, I could spend at least an hour talking all about the advanced automation stuff, so we'll dive into a little bit of that. But as I said, that's definitely worth digging into. We've got multi-stem bounce, so you can bounce your stems, kind of multiple stems simultaneously. And then possibly the biggie, which people are really kind of going to be excited about, is not just surround mixing, so not just 5.1 and 7.1, but Pro Tools Studio goes all the way up to Dolby Atmos. So that's, again, something we're going to be sort of digging into a little bit. And I know that's something which really kind of gives people who want to, try their hand at Dolby Atmos, get their feet wet. Pro Tools Studio is now going to be the perfect platform to do that. So I wanted to just clarify a couple of things, because, when we announced this new sort of Pro Tools lineup, we also announced that we've stopped selling new perpetual licenses, and we're now only selling new subscriptions. So I want to sort of explain a little bit about this, because I think there are some things which maybe some existing users have kind of got a bit confused about. So if you're the owner of a perpetual license of Pro Tools and you're up to date, you paid up on your upgrade support plan, then you're all good. You don't have to do anything at all. You are now a Pro Tools Studio owner, and you get all of these goodies. So just go to Avid Link. If you haven't got it already, go to Avid Link and download it, and then you'll see the update will be available for you. If you're in a perpetual license and you're not up to date, then what we've done, we've introduced a plan called Get Current. So Get Current is an offer which brings your perpetual license up to date. You get all the latest features, then you get 12 months of Pro Tools upgrades, and at the end of that 12 months, you just can kind of renew the upgrade plan and keep your software up to date. And then, although Avid has stopped selling perpetual licenses on the web store, our resellers are still selling them until they run out of stock. So if you really want a perpetual license, then go out and get it now whilst we have stock. So hopefully that's cleared up a few of the some of the questions that we've had over the past kind of few weeks since we introduced this, and hopefully that makes it clear for you. Anyone who's an existing Pro Tools user, then you're going to love Pro Tools Studio, and hopefully there's some people here who are new to Pro Tools, and I want to encourage you to get into Pro Tools Studio. So with that all the way, I'm going to get into talking with Jordan and Damien, because I think we've got some good stuff to talk about, and we will delve into the software features. So that's going to be a big part of what we talk about. But before we do that, we sort of chatted beforehand about some of the areas we were going to cover and so on. And Damien, I wanted to talk to you first just a little bit about your hardware setup. So say we're going to be doing a lot about software, but you are known as a tracking engineer, and you showed me this very kind of neat hardware setup. So I wonder if you kind of spend a few minutes just telling us about that.
Yeah, so recently I went over to the Carbon as my main interface, and it's really been amazing. First of all, I love just kind of the upgrade in sound, just immediately right off the bat. I love the way that the converters sounded in it. And just coming off of my old hardware, the low mids sounded like they were cleaned up. The top end was like very articulate. It was just one of those boxes and this is not even a plug for it. Like, just when I plugged it in, the speakers just sounded better immediately. And it's something great for someone like me who travels around LA a lot. I can have my system in a box. I have my single rack space Carbon, and then I have my Mac Mini all in like this rolling case. And I like to work off my personal rig wherever I go. So I just pull up to the studio, plug into their HDMI display, and plug in a couple mics and the monitor left, right, and I'm up and running with my system. And the biggest thing really, well, there's two other aspects of it that I love. One is the near zero latency while I'm tracking. So like, and Jordan can attest to this, when we track vocals now, the modern paradigm has been and will be is we have a bunch of plugins on the monitor path, and that includes auto-tune. So that causes a lot of latency. You can use some zero latency plugins, but of course, auto-tune is always going to have a little thing there. With the hybrid engine and using auto-tune hybrid, the latency is incredible. It's nearly zero. And it's one of those things where you could get around it with a low buffer size, but like once you hear near zero latency, it's really difficult to ever go back. It's just like, oh, it kind of opens up everything. And even going back to my old native interface, once I hear that, I'm like, oh man, it's so much better having the DSP plugin chain.
Nice.
So for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, just to back up a little bit, the Carbon has DSP chips in it, similar to a HDX card. So the plugins on your record track, when you put the track into record mode, those plugins are switched into DSP mode. So they're running off the DSP in the Carbon. And that creates your near zero latency monitoring path. The other big game changer for me was I like to have plugins on my master fader as I work because I want a limiter on there. I want some compression on there. I'm trying to make the record sound mixed from the very beginning. Now I can have DSP plugins on my master fader that are running in zero latency while I'm tracking. So previously, if you had stuff on your master, you have to disable it to get rid of the latency when you wanted to track something additionally. Now I have DSP plugins on the master fader right off the jump. So
Nice.
immediately I'm slamming into the master, everything's loud and punchy and sounding finished, and I never have to turn that off. Because
Right.
it was always a pain. You'd have to disable everything, then your mix would change, then you turn it back on and have to rebalance everything. So now with the DSP on the master, like everything is slamming right from the beginning. So I've been super excited about this piece. It's really flexible, tons of I/O, sounds amazing. So can't say enough
Nice.
good things about
Thanks for the plug. I know actually
it. Yeah.
the Jordan, I know you obviously you're not tracking your, sort of you're spending most of your time sort of mixing and more on that kind of production side. But I know you're working with the Carbon as well. So I guess you're using it in a slightly different way just for I guess the sound quality and that side of it.
Yeah, I've been on Carbon for I think about a year now, maybe a little bit less. Um, and yeah, I mean, most of my workflow is like writing, producing, mixing. Obviously, if I'm writing, I am doing some tracking, and whether it's my own vocal or a songwriter's vocal or something else. So I do get a chance to track a little bit in it. But I just found the biggest difference from my previous interface was just the sound quality is like unbelievably different and better. Um, and that's not something that I think is, I mean, some people's ear is like tuned and they can hear it right away. But I think for a lot of engineers, producers, mixers, just creatives in music, hearing those like the differences in like between two interfaces is like pretty a challenging task for many. But this was obvious. Like this made it like just supremely obvious how much clarity you get, and just the punchiness, the low end, like everything about it just feels like you've added a dimension to your music. So that was the biggest difference for me. I do use the DSP on occasion, but it's obviously plugin dependent on certain things, and because I'm doing less tracking, it's not always required. But so that's obviously a fantastic benefit for, obviously Damien, you said you're doing a lot of tracking with it, makes perfect sense. And the fact that Autotune was able to build a latency-free version is like amazing. Because as we all know, it's like a requirement pretty much for any vocal tracking session at this point.
100%.
So yeah, but for me, it was just sound quality. It's just like unbelievably crisp and sounds great.
Awesome. So so what I want to do now is I'm going to switch from talking about the hardware onto the software and some of the aspects of Pro Tools Studio which have been added from Ultimate, which are now available to Pro Tools Studio users. And so the first one I want to talk about is clip effects, and that's something which maybe people who just been using Pro Tools software, they've not seen it before, they don't know what it's about. So, and I know both of you are using clip effects a lot in the work that you do. So tell us a little bit about what it is and how you use it. Actually, Jordan, if you
jump in
first, you
Sure.
go first. And we'll come back to me,
So I use clip effects. I mean, so we've had clip gain for a long time now, and that was sort of where I started, where you're editing clip stuff, where it's just volume stuff, and then what was it, 2 years ago you guys added clip effects where you could actually compress or EQ or filter or do individual clips, process them differently. So for me, that's a lifesaver, because one of the most annoying things, whether you're mixing or producing a record, is, sometimes you get bad vocals where, like, one day it was cut on this mic in this studio, and the other day the other half of the verse is cut on this mic in this studio, and you hear the differences and you hear the performance differences. It's not always just the mic difference. Sometimes it's artist wakes up that day and ate something different, and their voice, just the delivery sounds different. And so, um, historically, I would have to separate that vocal to a new track, process it differently, and it becomes like rather annoying. In this case, you can get some quick EQing done and still have it run through your same compression chain and still try to control the signal in the same way, but you can get it to blend a lot easier. That's where I find I use it the vast majority of the time, is getting a vocal performance to sound like consistent throughout. And by the way, even if it's not recorded on different days, sometimes just the takes are different, or the vocalists for this one word happen to be closer to the mic and you get more proximity effect, whatever. So you may have to filter out a little more lows, or maybe it's add a little more lows, or get rid of some of the highs. So I find it's incredibly useful for that. And it's become like a necessity on pretty much every track now.
Nice. What about you, Damien? I know, as I say, you're, with all your kind of work with vocals as well, I'm sure you come across the same issues that Jordan's been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to show you a little something on my screen here.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
If I could share. But yeah, Jordan nailed that one. So, and I use it in the exact same manner that he does, because, like, here's the thing, I'm lazy. So, and we're trying to work as quickly as possible and get a lot of stuff done. So
you're not
if
lazy,
it's
you're efficient, and that's what makes you a good engineer. You're efficient.
right, maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
So if I'm trying to even out a vocal performance, and like Jordan said, the 9 times out of 10, the way that I use it is because there's something in the comp that just sounds a little different. And generally it's because they're a little closer or they're a little off the mic. So in this case, it's just so easy to grab this and be able to quickly change that single clip. And then you'll see the little EQ light up in the region when you do that. And for me, it saves a layer of automation. It saves perhaps having to redo that part. So yeah, that's the thing for me. And I use it all the time in this fashion, but like 9 times out of 10, this is what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get a more consistent vocal sound out of the comp without having to automate a plugin.
Perfect. Nice. Yeah, thanks for showing us. That definitely makes a big difference, sort of demonstrating it actually in Pro Tools and in a session. And I guess another sort of feature of Pro Tools Studio, which has again been in Pro Tools Ultimate for a long time, is the advanced automation. Now, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there which, and I said already, I could talk for hours on this. There's a lot of stuff in there, and it was really kind of came into Pro Tools from sort of console workflows. So things like, when you got multiple faders writing at one time, so that you can kind of wind back and it will automatically join your automation and carry on writing, and all these kind of things, with the way that people are used to working with large format consoles. But there's also some really, I guess, more kind of straightforward stuff which people use all the time, like trim automation. And I think, Damien, again, you've got some examples there of sort of how and why you use trim automation and why that's so important to the way that you work.
Yeah, sure. So here's my screen again, and this was something that I picked up a few years ago, is basically writing all of my vocal automation in trim mode as opposed to volume automation. And for me, the big advantage of that is you may get all of your parts automated the way you like it, and then you go back and you're like, oh, the vocal's a little loud. And you just wanted to grab the fader and simply bring it down. Well, the thing is, if you do that in volume automation, your fader just snaps back to its original position. But if you write it in trim mode, then you're free to move the fader up and down, and when you hit play, the fader will retain that position. So like a lot of you, I had regular Pro Tools for a long time, which didn't have trim. I had it in a larger studio, and then when I went off on my own, I was back to like regular Pro Tools, and that function was no longer in regular Pro Tools. Um, and that was huge because it completely changed the way that I worked. I had to go back to this old method, and it really messed up my workflow. So now that it's back in Pro Tools Studio, I highly suggest you guys check it out because it's a great way to work, and I'm super excited that that feature is now available at the normal software level.
Yeah,
And
definitely. And I
sidebar,
think,
you
oh,
just sorry, you just taught me something new because I always write automation. I have an S1 here too. It's just
Hmm.
got 8 faders. That's all I need because I like riding a fader like naturally with my hand. But I always do it on volume automation. Then you're right. When the client comes back and is like, turn the vocal up 2 dB, you have to go and like nudge the volume line up. And
Yeah.
what I would historically do is like I would just nudge the trim line up, but then you don't have it on the fader. So working
Hmm.
the opposite way, where you write the automation on the trim or on the yeah, I guess the trim side, and then just use volume, just use your fader as you normally would. I can't believe I never thought of that. So that's genius. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah,
As soon as I unlocked that, I was like, oh, this is the way to write automation.
1000%.
And then
I can't even believe I didn't think of like just flipping the order there. It's like makes perfect sense.
you don't really see anyone do it. It's not a very common thing. I think everyone just considered it because of what it's named. I think everyone considered it like, oh, it's when you needed to trim something back that was already written. But in my opinion, it's the way to write your automation.
Yeah, no, it's genius.
nice. We've all learned something already.
Yeah. I'm gonna start using it. I'm legit gonna start using that. That's because it does save such a. It's like all the little when you're making music. It's all the little annoying things that they exist everywhere, and it's not even just software stuff. It just the workflows. There's always little things. We all have our own idiosyncrasies that sort of create challenges or whatever. And anytime you can solve one of those little things that little pain
Yep,
points, that's like an extra 30 seconds or an extra even 15 seconds, it just means you have more time where you're just being creative and just focusing on
absolutely.
what's the record sound like.
Yeah.
And then I
Which I
love
think
if you hold down Control Command and hit the right arrow twice, you're in your automation mode.
didn't
So
know
you can
that one
quickly
either.
jump. If you hold Control Command and click back on the track header, it'll go back to waveform view, but then you can just go dum dum, and then now you're in your right mode. Now you're in your
Oh,
automation mode. So
I love that.
quickly go between the two.
Yeah, definitely. That command control, especially with the control surface, because you can do command control, tap on the fader or an
Oh
automation
yeah,
parameter, and that will just jump straight to that view.
right.
Yeah, there's a lot. So yeah, that sort of I mean, the automation in Pro Tools is pretty, it's pretty comprehensive, but that advanced automation just kind of takes it up to another level, and just, as I say, gives you a whole bunch of different options. And I love the fact, yeah, you're talking about, you've got your trim automation lane, you've got your main automation, you can put VCA automation on top of that. There's a lot of ways to kind of control things and make sure you've got a handle on everything. So yeah, that's awesome, really is. So Jordan, I wanted just to sort of switch gears slightly. You are not just a music producer. You've also become a plugin developer, and sort of you've got a nice kind of suite of plugins going on. And I just wanted, maybe it'd be interesting for people to kind of hear about, I guess, what motivated you to get into that, what you kind of thought you'd, because there's so many plugins out there, and it's
There
like,
is.
so what motivated you to sort of kind of get into that world, and how did you start?
Well, it was sort of a confluence of issues or thoughts or just feelings that I had. One, I've always been into tech. I've founded a few tech companies, co-founded a few tech companies, and I invest in tech companies, and so I knew, like, if I didn't work in music, that would be the field that I would work in, some sort of like product design or development of some sort of technology. And so I already had an interest in it. And I was kind of a little bored and just looking for ways to, just find new ways to be creative. And I thought I was able, to bring some things to the table, my own ideas and things that I didn't see other developers doing. But then also, like, if I'm keeping it real, there's I've always worked in pop music. I mean, multiple genres. I've worked in hip hop and EDM and just straight up down the middle pop and but generally speaking, it's multiple genres, but everything I do kind of leans towards contemporary radio sounding music. And I kind of look back and there are a few exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, the sound of music is defined by like 20-year-olds, or 25-year-olds. Like, and I'm in my mid 30s now, and so uh, luckily I'm still working and I'm still staying busy. But one of those days, like, there's gonna be some new 22-year-old like sick mixer who's just crushing it, or producer who's just writing the dopest top lines or making the sickest beats, and like they're going to be the ones who are getting the calls and busy. So for me, I love making music, and contributing on the technology side of things with plugins was a way for me to sort of continue to make a contribution to a business and an industry that I love, but just in new ways, and in ways that I think are less defined by, youth and these sorts of things. So my own eventual demise is part of part of my thought process and everything. But yeah, that's kind of why I did it, and I still think I have a lot to achieve and a lot to do there. And obviously, we have Spread in the Inner Circle program, so anybody who's subscribing to whether you have a Pro Tools Studio or Ultimate or whatever, I think everyone gets a copy of Spread, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. If you're a
So
subscriber,
yeah,
you get Spread. So
yeah,
it's a
we're
good,
working hard on the next one now too. So
nice.
Can I
So
show
Damien, I
my
guess, yeah. Have
my
you tried them?
BDE? Yeah, because I love BDE. And I'll
Amy's
show you
showing all the
here.
love today.
Yeah,
Um,
I really like it on my kick drum. I have this preset I created. You guys can see it here and
Mhm.
DL
kind of
kick.
grab the settings. My camera's in the way, so I need to kind of move around to see it. But have a little bit of bit crush happening, a little bit of compression happening. The distortion algorithm is set to nuke. And yeah, those are my kick drum settings that I like to start with there.
So I have a
Um,
question. Do you ever use, so one of the challenges with this plugin was anytime you develop something new, you have to educate the consumer. And that's something that
yeah,
I'm learning is what are the best ways to educate the consumer on certain things? So like, this is like the world's first distortion, at least that I'm aware of, that has like dynamic preservation is what we called it. Um, but that speed button in the middle, and then the range and the speed sliders that are just on the first ring around the drive knob,
right.
uh, they allow you to sort of reclaim any dynamics that are lost. So you could actually like put a distortion on a reverb tail, and if you drag that range down, you won't get like, if anybody doesn't know how distortion works, you basically just increase the gain until it hits a threshold and starts crushing your signal. And that's the simplest way of putting it. But sometimes you don't want to have like an in your face loud thing. You still want to have the effect and the grittiness, but you still want to have a nice smooth reverb tail. So it allows you to do that. And I just wonder, did you even know that existed, or do you ever
Yeah, I
use it?
did. And I'm a real dork with this stuff too. Like I still, anytime I get a new plugin, I like to read the manual and watch the videos and like actually really get an in-depth understanding
So
of how it
you're
works.
that
Because
one
yours
person
has,
who downloaded the
yeah,
manual. Oh, okay, got it.
that's me.
Yeah.
Um, because even the way that you set up the gain staging, I think is kind of crucial to the plugin, right? To be able to get the distortion to hit at a certain threshold and then the auto gain to kick in. So I feel like this plugin, although the GUI is super easy to understand, you can dive right into it, but actually understanding how to set your input gain right from the very beginning kind of like allows you to get the most out of this
Do you use
plugin.
the inspector for that?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So you just hit the magnifying glass, play some music, and
Yep.
it'll adjust your
Yep.
your signal. Yeah. So yeah, we try to do little things like that. Again, like because I'm an engineer and a producer, and I work on music all the time, and I work with other people's plugins all the time. Like I'm always looking for those little time savings. If I can save somebody 20 seconds here by adding a feature, like those are the wins in my book. So we try to, on every product, at least add something new that you haven't seen before.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
You've done a great job with that. Mhm.
So thank you. Yeah.
Nice. So I want to stay on the subject of mixing because, as I said at the beginning, that the fact that you've not just got surround in Pro Tools Studio, but Dolby Atmos. And I know that's there's a big push on Dolby Atmos right now. Apple's kind of introduced spatial audio into Apple Music probably just about a year ago. And that's really kind of kickstarted the industry and really kind of driven the demand for kind of more Dolby Atmos and spatial audio content. So yeah, I'd be interested to kind of hear from both of you, because I know you've both been kind of done some Atmos mixing. So how you've got on with that, and obviously maybe some tips for people who are kind of just starting out and want to try it out. Maybe if you got some tips and tricks as they get going. So I don't know who wants to take that first.
Well, I've been mixing on Atmos for at least 8 months now, since sometime mid or early mid last year, and yeah, I mean, it's been a unique process in learning it. There's obviously a few technical hurdles, and Pro Tools solves a lot of those problems and makes it fairly easy. But really, the learning curve is like, what is a good Atmos mix? This is a question that I've worked with A&Rs and artists, and everyone seems to have a different opinion what makes a good Atmos mix. And I think that's actually a good thing, because we're in the process of sort of figuring it out. What do people actually like? Because, on one hand, you have all this like flexibility of motion and space where you can do some really wild and crazy things. But then it begs the question, are those, if you're having a vocal spin around your head and jump over you or whatever, do these things create more distraction and take away from the music? And you have to find that thin line, that balance where you can add emotion to the music and creativity to the music by having this third dimension, if you will. Or I guess, well, yeah, third dimension, we'll call it. And yeah, like, or how do you balance like the creative layers of it and just have it sounding sonically great, and, spacing things out. So I found like a good balance for me is like, there might be one sound or the odd sound that you can sort of put a spotlight on and do something crazy with, have it spin around your head or do flybys or things like that. A lot of sound effects, great to kind of use it for that. But the meat and potatoes of a record, like kicks, snares, vocals, bass, I tend to keep sort of centered and then space everything else out around it. Yeah, it's been great working in it, and I think we're all kind of figuring it out, and I'm excited to hear like what other people are doing with it as well, because it's sort of all a learning process at this point.
Absolutely. How about you, Damien? How's your experience been?
Yeah, it is interesting. Like Jordan said, it's kind of the Wild West right now. We don't have a set of best practices necessarily. Like with stereo, you had a lot of limitations. It was kind of left, right, center, and this is what you got. So I'm mixing in the binaural world, meaning I'm just mixing with headphones at home because I don't have 27 Amphions in here yet. But this is the one thing that I've found really interesting, and that's like piqued my curiosity. And this is something that all of you at home can also do. Is what's interesting to me is now mixing in the binaural world with headphones on. Now I'm mixing specifically for a format that the listener's actually going to hear. So we're kind of in this space right now where mixing engineers are still mixing on a set of stereo speakers. And I might be one of the only people to listen to that record on two speakers in a like traditional hi-fi environment with two speakers in front of me. It's not the 70s anymore where everyone has a hi-fi system at home. So my end user, most of them are listening to records on the iPhone, on their AirPods, and on sound bars and in their car. So with the binaural world, I can actually make a mix sound amazing in headphones, and my end user is actually going to listen to that mix in the same way. And that's really exciting for me because now you can do crazy things in headphones that will actually translate to the consumer. So I'm sure anyone at home that's ever mixed on headphones has like made an amazing mix in headphones and then listened to it on like a set of speakers and it sounded like total garbage. And then you have like a translation problem. It's like, well, that mix isn't really going to work in the real world because it sounds terrible. Now we can actually mix in Atmos binaural with headphones on, make insane sounding mixes in headphones, and know that most likely the consumer is also going to listen to it in the same way with their headphones or their AirPods or something like that. So that's exciting for me, is like just creating this entirely new environment that I know is going to translate to the person listening to it.
And just to add to what you're saying, like when the Atmos stuff really started coming to prominence, like, there's a number of engineers who go and have built a huge Atmos studio with, like you said, 27 Amphions or, PMCs or whatever. I actually think mixing Atmos binaurally is and should be the preferred method, because the reality is it's like literally a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of 1% of people are actually going to be able to re-listen to those Atmos mixes in an Atmos room. Nobody's going to get the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And so you might as well mix for the format they're going to listen, which is like 99.99% of the time going to be headphones. So
Yeah, I think that's really cool because the last couple of decades, we actually, as mixing engineers, we kind of lost the ability to mix for the format that music was listened on.
we had to interpret.
Right.
Yeah.
Where back
Uh,
in like the 60s and 70s, nearly 100% of the consumers were actually listening on a set of speakers.
yeah.
So now we can mix specifically for headphones, make things sound amazing in headphones, and know that the listener is going to enjoy it in the same way. So, and it's really cool because in Pro Tools now you have your surround panner, get Dolby Renderer, and set and plug in your headphones, and you're rocking. It's super easy to do.
Yeah.
And there's no
Absolutely.
rules right now, which is really fun. We're kind of like, uh, I feel like it's the audio guys that like are going to step in and figure out how to break the thing. We're already like
Yeah.
pushing things into the LFE channel we shouldn't be, and putting 808s in the center channel that just like blow your face off because it's no longer just like a left right thing creating a phantom image in the center. So now like I'm literally shoving the 808 and the kick in the center channel, and it just sounds like it's smacking you right in the forehead. Um, so it's really fun and we're figuring out how to like take reverbs or delays and just not to get too much into the weeds of how the Atmos thing works, but you have a 7.1 surround bed in your Pro Tools session, which is kind of like your master fader essentially. And then you have your objects, which are places in space that you can put a sound. So now we can take these sounds, like I might take a delay return from Echo Boy and just put it like in the far back corners and just have it come back there. And there's all sorts of cool ways to use this to manipulate the image around you. So, and there's no like set rules right now. We're all still figuring this stuff out. So
Yep.
it's actually really fun in that respect. It's a whole new world.
Yeah.
No, as you say, and the great news, of course, is that everything you're talking about, rather than because there's quite a big jump with Atmos mixing, right? You're either got a pair of headphones, so just a two-channel interface, and a good pair of headphones, and you're away, or it's like a sort of minimum,
A
sort
hundred
of
thousand
12.
dollars and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and
Yeah.
there's really nothing in between. So
Yeah.
so yeah, it's great to have that kind of opportunity. And I actually probably should also mention, just as part of the kind of the Pro Tools Studio subscription, you get the Dolby Atmos production suite for 1/3 of the normal price. So again, it's just kind of lowering the barrier to entry for people to be kind of mixing in Atmos using the tools that all these mixes are being done in. So this is definitely an area of interest, and I'm sure it will be. It's a journey that we're on, as you say. We're kind of at the start of the journey. Everyone's learning, and so yeah, I think kind of getting into it is it's a good time to be playing around with Dolby Atmos and playing around
Yeah.
with your mixing.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
just so you guys know out there, it's a two-part thing. So you need to have the Dolby renderer software also.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically where you print your final mix to. So that runs alongside with Pro Tools.
I have a question for Damien, actually. You've done a fair bit of Atmos, right? So are you using the renderer kind of as a tape machine where you're recording into it, or are you just bouncing straight out of Pro Tools and just it's connected to the renderer on the output, but you're still bouncing your ADM, BWF or whatever through Pro Tools? like an
Yeah, I
offline.
know that you can bounce your ADM through Pro Tools, but I haven't done that yet. I've been doing everything through the renderer.
Do you use the Dolby Panner or the built-in Pro Tools Avid one?
That's a good question because they are very different. And I use them
Incredibly
I
different.
use them for different things because basically all we're doing in the binaural world in order to make something sound like it is behind you or below you or to the sides is we're manipulating phase and reverb to create that sense of space that doesn't physically exist. And I think that the panner, the Pro Tools built-in surround panner, and the Dolby renderer handle that in very different ways. Their algorithms to actually make something have that sense of space. So I kind of pick and choose depending on what the source is.
Well, the
For the
music
Dolby
panel
one, it's
has, yeah, the music panel's got lots of kind of, I guess, specific options for like more kind of sequencer based panning and all this kind of stuff, right?
yeah, that's the
Um,
coolest feature of the Dolby one is the built-in sequencer. So you can just make something go joot 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 joot, and then it just does it.
Yeah.
we're getting a lot of questions now. We're talking about Atmos, of course. The questions start coming in. We've got a
Andrew
bunch of
Sheps
questions
isn't
coming
here.
in.
That's for yeah.
Okay, easy one then. What headphones do you mix on? This is for both of you.
I have Sennheiser HD 650s. I also have a pair of Sennheiser HD 800s, but I find that they are just so alien to what music actually sounds like. I mean, they're incredible headphones, but it going back to, now we're in this world where we can mix using Atmos. You mix in headphones and everyone else is going to listen and get the same thing. That generally makes sense if all headphones kind of sort of ish sound the same, which many do. They have their differences, but that HD 800 is like different. It just sounds so crisp in a way that it feels alien. So I don't you generally mix in it. The 650s are the great balance of what a speaker would give me in headphones.
Yeah, same. I have the Sennheiser 6XXs modified by Massdrop.
Oh yeah. Oh, you got the Master. Yeah. So they're
Yeah.
actually the same headphone. I think I have a longer cable than you do.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that's that's the same thing,
Yeah.
So I've
But
had
I
these
just
little
ordered it.
tenuous and they work great.
Oh yeah. I just ordered a set of the new Manny Marquin Audis that look
Oh,
amazing.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really keen to try those out. They were announced
Yeah, I just listened
at
to them at
NAMM, right?
NAMM and they sound amazing. So that's kind of
Yeah.
like the upgraded version of the LCD X's. So
Hmm.
hoping
Yeah,
in
so those
July to get
I
those.
met the gentleman who I actually went down and visited the Odyssey factory, and they do magnetic planar
Hmm.
headphones, I think. So it's a
Yeah,
different technology. They don't have drivers that are
yeah.
pushing air. Um, so a completely different technology and how they actually showed me the whole process of how they make them. It's actually remarkably interesting.
Wow,
Um,
cool. Yeah, they're amazing headphones. They sound
yeah,
incredible. So.
yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I think there was another question about whether headphones. I mean, basically, you're mixing just on regular headphones because, of course, that's, as you
Hmm.
say, that's what people are going to be listening to, and you're listening to the binaural mix coming out of the renderer. So that's, again, you want to be hearing what the end user is going to be hearing.
Yeah, and then it's super easy to also in the renderer, you export your file as an M4A,
Hmm.
which is like Apple's format basically, and then you can just drop that on your iPhone and plug in your AirPods and listen exactly how the consumer is going to listen to.
Yeah,
That's your
perfect.
reference file that you send to your clients also, the M4A file.
Yeah. So actually, I guess one more just on the Atmos thing. As I say, that always generates questions. So um how do you kind of see the adoption? As I said, we've kind of we had this initial push based on on Apple Music, even though Amazon and Tidal were doing it already. Obviously Apple Music coming on board really sort of push things along quickly. How do you sort of see that adoption? How do you see that progression of Atmos kind of content as well, alongside stereo or even taking over?
I mean, I think people they're gonna make a choice. They're gonna listen to both and see what they like better. I wish there was an easier way in Apple Music. to just like have an instant button where you can switch back and forth, where you don't have to go into a settings menu and then adjust and whatever. Like I should just be able to like click, let me hear an Atmos, and it just swaps the file from the exact same point. Because our delivery requirements are that the stereo mix and the Atmos mix have to have the exact same start point, the exact same to the sample endpoint. Everything has to be identical, and that's so that they can line the two sounds up and have that swap over. But I find it's like there's a few steps to get it to switch over. So I just wish that they would have like an A/B so that people could listen and be able to hear instantly like which they like better. And then that would allow them to kind of like use that as their default listening method. So
And
a little request from Apple if they're listening.
And presumably you do your stereo mix and then you do like an Atmos version separately. You'd never derive a stereo mix from the Atmos mix, right?
Every Atmos mix I've done, and Damien, maybe you have a different approach to this, but is always working off stems. So, and in some cases, I'm doing both mixes, the stereo and the Atmos, in which case I finish my stereo mix, get it approved, print it, goes to mastering, album's done, then print the stems, and then start the Atmos mix process as a separate, project basically. And then in other cases, I'm just doing the Atmos and a client sending me their mix stems. So, but it always comes from the end mix stem. And I'm generally not making any changes, like in rare cases sometimes, but I'm generally not making any mix changes to the sound of things. I'm just putting them in a space. So Atmos mixes I find are much quicker. My version of Atmos mix I can get done in half an hour or less, depending on the size of the song and how much work needs to go into it. But I don't know, Damien, do you have what's your Atmos workflow? Or like, are you able to get one of those mixes done in half an hour? Or
Yeah, totally. It's exactly the same. Even like yesterday, I worked on a record that I mastered. I didn't mix it. They just asked me to master it and do the Atmos mix.
Yeah.
So a little different flow. But again, I was working from stems, and yeah, I'm just kind of building a space. I'm not trying to rewrite anything. I'm just trying to fan it out in a interesting way.
Yeah.
But the same way, yeah, I would always want to work from stems. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, it's just easier to manage. And it's still very like CPU intensive to start using a lot of surround effects. And
Yeah.
so having a slimmed down stem session, I feel like allows me to kind of get through the mix in a more reasonable way.
Facts.
Whether or not this format catches on, I don't know. I mean, I might get in trouble for this, but like I don't know if the kids care. I feel like the kids are the ones that dictate where music goes and how we listen to music. I feel like right now this is consumerism happening. These are companies kind of forcing a format and a technology on people to buy things and to like listen to things in a certain way and subscribe to things. And well, I think it's cool and interesting and kind of fun. Ultimately, who knows? I don't know if it's going to catch on with the kids or if they just really like the way things work right now and it's going to be that way for the next 20 years. I do see it taking off in like the metaverse and in like virtual worlds. I think immersive stuff where you're kind of living in that world, and head tracking and stuff makes sense when you're at a concert or so I do definitely see a place for it there and like in cinema. But in terms of just like your typical way that we consume music, I'm not really sure. So
Yeah, I agree. It's yet to be determined whether it'll catch on. But I'm sure there's people in the chat who are sort of that demo who like, are you guys listening to Atmos mixes, or do you find that you're just sticking to stereo? I mean,
yeah, and that's a good question. Yeah, if
got
anyone's
almost 300 people in here, somebody's got an opinion on it.
definitely.
So,
Actually, so just there's a couple of questions which are about the just more, I guess, more kind of the general mixing side of things and confidence checking and that kind of thing. So when you do your mix, and maybe this applies to Atmos mixers as well, and I don't know if you have the ability to kind of check them elsewhere. But when you do a mix, what do you do about checking it in different environments to make sure it sounds good? And do you try any of those plugins which kind of emulate the space? And again, it's that sort of that world of kind of binaural emulation. And there's a few plugins out there
Talking
now.
about like the Slate VSX.
Yeah, that's one. And there's a few sort of that kind of thing. So yeah, do you take your mix to some places that you know, or do you ever try any of these kind of virtual spaces?
When I mix a record, first of all, I do use VSX on occasion. I don't mix in it, but I'll reference on them. And but a lot of times I'm like, finish a mix, I want to listen to it literally on my phone speaker just to see, like, am I getting everything I want out of it? Obviously, you're not getting a lot of bass or anything like that. Listen in the car. Listen, I have like a home speakers in my house, like listen through those. I try to listen in like normal environments, not because I have like a beautiful speakers. I'm using Genelex, and my room sounds better than 99.99% of people's listening environment. So I want to hear it on regular shit, pretty much. That's my only goal. But there's no, like, I don't have a set plan or workflow. I just like start listening to it anywhere I'm at, just to see, like, oh, does that work? Okay, cool. And I also try to like not listen too critically when I'm doing those things, to see what am I picking up on, what bothers me just naturally, and not like when I'm laser focused on it. So that's usually my flow.
Yeah, I do the same. I have a couple Bluetooth speakers. I have a Bose one, and I have a Beats Pill. So I'll listen on those. I mix on Amphion 118s with the flex bass sub. And then I have a set of cubes, like the Reftone cubes, and then I have the IK iLouds. Um, Basically, with all of that stuff, I'm just trying to hear basic consumer playback, just
Yeah.
trying to hear how things sound on a normal system. Um, and then, like Jordan does, I love to actually use audio movers on my master fader and send that to my phone. And then I'll literally mix through my phone. I'll make adjustments to the mix and turn off my speakers and just listen through my iPhone.
Oh, I don't do
So
that. I
kind of,
just bounce and listen, but
yeah, no, I do. I literally make sure I'll make changes based on the phone.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Great.
yeah, nothing like insanely extreme, but like I'm just trying to make sure everything kind of sounds right in that world. Because, like, I don't know, man, I run into so many people that are just blasting music out of their phone. It just kind of seems like the wave. So,
Yeah.
um, and I'll listen in the car and stuff, but like same thing. I just try to like get a general overview of like how all these environments sound. Not really take one thing to heart, but if I notice something weird in multiple places, then I know that it's probably a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I've got a few interesting questions just to cover. So I think there's one specifically for Damien. I know right the kind of back near the beginning, you showed you talked a bit about using Carbon and having the plugins on your master fader and so on. So
Yeah.
the question was, do you actually mix with all those kind of live on your master fader, or do you put those on kind of later in the mix process?
No, I'm very much like once it's on there, we're working into it, and that becomes
Okay.
the DNA of the thing. You can't take it off after that because everything's going to fall apart. I mean, you could, but I wouldn't recommend it. But that's kind of what I'm going for. Is like I want to make the record sound finished from the very first end of day bounce that we make till the final mix. So that stuff becomes part of the sound.
Nice. There's one. So this is one I think is an interesting one, which is the question is, how do you figure out a vocal chain with a new artist? And I guess maybe the question is also, do you have like a set vocal chain that you use, or how much do you kind of move it around when you're working with a new artist?
It's typically a pretty set thing in the places that I work with and the people that I work with. It's usually some sort of iteration of a Neve mic pre, like a 1073 or 1081. and the ubiquitous compressor, the CL1B, mainly because like they just work. It's very forgiving. It's got a huge sweet spot to it. You can use a lot of gain reduction and kind of pin the vocal in place nicely, and they're in almost all of the studios. It's not that it's like, insurmountably better than anything else that's made, but like it's just kind of become something that works and is available and widely used. I have a pretty specific plug-in chain on my record track that I use that really kind of makes the vocal sound finished. And I guess the biggest thing would just be like mic selection. So like if you have the luxury of putting up two different mics, seeing which one you like better, that's great. If you don't, it's okay, because at this point in the game, like we're just trying to capture data because we can do so much on the back end. We can manipulate sounds in so many ways with EQ and compression and saturation. Honestly, like $100 mic versus a $10,000 mic, by the time you EQ and compress it, not a huge difference. And the person at the end of the day listening probably isn't going to know. So just use what you got, make the best of it.
Yeah, I agree. I joke with my engineer friends. I always say I'm an earhead, not a gearhead.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And what I mean by that is like you just what you said, you use what you have available to you. If you want to go buy a $10,000 mic, like, okay, go have at it. But it's definitely not the difference maker between a bad song and a great song. A great song is a good idea. It requires, a unique approach to production. It requires like looking inside and like, what am I going to write about? How am I going to say it in a clever way that will resonate with people? And like, these are the things that make songs good, not, the price of the mic.
Yeah,
and so
nobody cares.
nobody cares. It's not, but it's interesting because I think one thing that we all share in music is this a certain level of imposter syndrome. And for those that don't know, like imposter syndrome, basically telling yourself like, I'm not good enough. Why am I here? I shouldn't be doing this. Everyone's so much better than me. We all feel it. I found that like in music people, the solution to that feeling of imposter syndrome is go buy more stuff. So
Yeah, the magic bullet.
Yeah, exactly. And the reality is like, that doesn't change anything unless that stuff is going to change your mentality and how you're approaching the record or anything like that. It's not really actually doing anything. So it's just a bit of a placebo effect. So yeah, it's use what you have available to you, because trust me, some of these kids right now are making hit records on an old laptop with, cracked software and that's it. And they're making hit records. So hopefully with that hit record money, they'll go buy the stuff. But the point is, you don't need to go crazy to be able to make a good record. You don't have to spend a ton of money. You can, all the tools are available now. I think it's a matter of being in if you have Pro Tools, make sure you know what you're doing in it, get comfortable. Like comfort is more important than anything to me. Just being able to like be creative and not have the technology get in the way. So
yeah, learn the tools that you have. Like I did a little demo mix for NAMM for Avid that I think will be up pretty soon, and I used all stock plugins, and it came out really good. It was a really fun exercise as someone who has every plugin known to man. And I love showing my mix templates and like the little tricks I do and how I route stuff. But at the end of the day, none of that really matters. It's about what's between your ears, and you can use any of the tools that you have at your disposal to get there. It's not the reason me or Swivel's mixes sound the way they do isn't because we have some plugin that you guys don't have or you've never seen before, or the way we route our parallel compression, the EQ choices. Like it's about taste and about kind of knowing what you want and knowing how to get there. Not necessarily about the gear.
Taste, number one. Yep.
Yeah. That's good. Love this comment. Someone's put in, I'm a kid and we care.
I think that was I read that. I think that was in reference to like
absolutely. It was your question about no, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. Love
Yeah.
it.
Okay,
Love it.
good to
Yeah.
know.
Well, it's good to know.
Thanks,
Yeah.
kid.
Do your friends care? That's the question.
Right.
No, because
Thank you,
you're
kid.
you're in an Avid webinar right now. So what about your friends who are playing Fortnite or Roblox? What are they?
What
Do
about
they?
your girlfriends?
Yeah. Does your girlfriend care about Atmos, or is it just we gotta understand this?
Yeah, we
Um,
do. It's interesting you used the word emotion though a bit earlier on when you talked about Atmos. And I do think there's something about there's sort of an emotional aspect that if people don't even they have no idea that there's kind of what Atmos is and what immersive is and what sound coming around. They just feel there's something different about it and they're kind of inside the music. I think a good Atmos mix can do that.
I think I mean that's music in general. I think
Mm,
music is designed. We create music to make you feel
mm,
something, anything.
mm.
Um, and by the way, that's hard because as a songwriter and as a producer, like I can make a lot of like great sounding records, but that doesn't mean they all connect and evoke a feeling or an emotion or anything. And that's a hard thing to sort of figure out. So if you're able to introduce that, whether it's via Atmos through that technology or just through clever songwriting or really interesting emotional chords that sort of make somebody feel something, that's what music's about. The worst music is stuff that you listen to and you're like, I feel nothing.
Yeah.
So anytime you can add a little bit of emotion to it, and if Atmos does that for certain people, then I think it will absolutely catch on and become a staple.
Yeah. Definitely.
So
Good, good. So we got I think a lot of the questions coming in. There's a lot to do with the kind of the nuts and bolts and craft of working in Atmos, and I think certainly from we should do like a follow-up session talking a bit more about that stuff and not getting into it now. There was one actually around somebody asked about the new Pro Tools search feature. So I just would say we did maybe about 6 weeks ago, we did a session where we kind of introduced all of the kind of the new features in Pro Tools. So I'd just encourage you to go to the Avid Pro Tools YouTube channel and check out some of those things we put up there to kind of show you what's new in Pro Tools. But I think maybe just to finish off with the two of you, maybe just to be interesting to find out kind of what's next for you. So you're obviously busy people, you've got a lot going on. So what have you got coming up? What's exciting?
well, I'll jump in just because I see Steve Foster asked a question: do you use any dedicated channel strip plugins? So obviously on my journey of creating plugins, I'm always trying to come up with what's the next thing, what do I care about next, because I have to prioritize like I can't just build every idea at once. The next plugin we're building is actually a channel strip. I'm convinced that it's going to be the best channel strip ever created. I might be a little biased, but that was sort of the challenge to my development team and the people who I'm working with, collaborating with to like build these things. Was we're not going to build a channel strip unless we think we can make the best channel strip ever created. Otherwise, there's too many of them. A lot of people have, if we can't bring something to the table, add something new, and make it unique and interesting and valuable, we're not going to do it.
Hmm.
So I think we've created a number of innovations on it that you have probably not seen on a channel strip, that are going to be incredibly useful. And it's not just a matter of like throw every effect at it. It's like, what are the most useful effects on a channel strip? So anyways, typically I haven't used a single channel strip plugin. I've usually kind of on my, every once in a while, I like the VMR from Slate, but most of the time I'm using like a dedicated de-esser, a compressor, an EQ, and whatever else I'm using. In this case, I think I've been able to, we're still in development, but we'll be able to have a product that you could just throw on a vocal and get everything you want out of it, including multiple compressors. So,
Right.
yeah, that's what I'm focused on. And yeah, just built a new studio and just getting back into writing and focus on that too. So I just moved into a new house. So it's been an adjustment period the last few months.
Yeah, no, we've seen, I think, seen your studio coming together the past couple of weeks as we've been talking. So it's
Yeah,
good to see it.
yeah, yeah.
Looking great. So how about you, Damien?
I just opened the chat. There's actually some great stuff in here. There's some cool stuff and some really funny
It's some
stuff.
great stuff. We could
Which
we
is
could keep going on
Avid
for
stock
hours.
plugins are amazing. Yes, they are. And our friend the kid, he said, "My friends do not," which I think was in reference of if they care or not.
Yeah.
And then he also
Yeah,
said,
he said does not have a
I don't,
girlfriend. But
he said, I don't have a girlfriend. So, you never know. Summer's coming up. Maybe
yeah,
things will change for you. And
yeah.
if you start mixing in Atmos, you'll get one. They'll be
It's
lining
it's
up.
it's uncuffing season. No, let's not mislead. Okay, let's not mislead.
Yeah. No, there's some cool stuff in here. Um, I'm currently around town tracking with a bunch of people and finishing up Justin Timberlake's new album. It's getting closer and closer. Um, so I kind of split my time between here at the house mixing and in any given studio with any given producer or artist. Yeah, so I'm just kind of around LA doing my thing right now. Um, for channel strips, I'm kind of like Swivel, the same thing. I'm actually really looking forward to yours and checking it out. And it'd be cool to have all those tools
I'll get you a
in
beta.
one. Does yours, does it have multiple de-essers or is it have some
Yeah,
dynamic EQ or
yeah. There's dynamic EQ. You can have multiple de-essers. You can have
cool?
up to 3 compressors. There's a limiter. There's a gate. There's some other things I'm not going to talk about yet. But we're doing yeah. And the key in that is like the biggest challenge in making a channel strip is how do you deliver all of the functionality and workflow, but you also have to make sure the plugin is not overly complex to use and
Yeah,
you got to be able to open it up and immediately know what you're doing and where you're going and how you're doing it. And so we're working really hard to create even simple things like color coordination on knobs and things, so you understand what you're getting visual feedback on everything you do, so it makes the plugin that much easier to use. And I know we talked a little offline. You're like, yeah, I'm reading the manuals and all that sort of stuff. That's great and that's wonderful, but like most people don't. And so the goal is, how do you create something that everyone understands how to use, is rich with functionality, is not complex to look at and interact with, and generally speaking, you don't have to use a manual. So
yeah,
it's tough. It's a challenge, but I'm excited. I think we're going to get there.
yeah. Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, currently, been waiting for the Fab Filter channel strip for years now. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but kind of live and die by that stuff. And I love all of my SSL channel strips, of course. Mainly the Brainworks ones are the ones that I'm using, although the Waves ones are great too. But I'm not too precious with it. I have so many at this point, and now it just kind of comes down to like, do I want this color or am I just bored with this and kind of want to like be inspired in a different way? So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll use pretty much anything. But oh, Anonymous is funny. Whoever this is, they saw my session. Yeah, Stranger Things. I wish I could play this for you guys because it's a really great record. Her name is Ali Salort. She's a new artist, Pop Wansel, and Roger produced this, and Some Randoms also. Shout out to Some Randoms. He saw that this was the song that I put up. Can't play it, unfortunately. The song is out, but yeah, I wish I could show you guys. But thanks for catching that. Hope you enjoyed it.
Nice one. Well, thank you so much to both of you. I know for giving up your time this morning. It's been a real pleasure having you on and discussing all of these. The craft and the art of what you do has been amazing, and hopefully people have learned a little bit about Pro Tools Studio as well along the line. So, thanks again. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Cheers.
See ya.